This week's Parashas Emor, begins with the laws of Thu May Kohanim. We know there are special privileges as well as responsibilities of being a Kohen. The privileges, you get to do Vayikra Kohanim, you get to bless the people, the congregation, you get the first aliyah, you get to bench. However, there are certain restrictions as well because of the kedushas kahuna, the sanctity of a kohen, and one of those is coming in contact with the dead. So Emor Kohanim b'nei Aaron. So Chazal tell us b'nei Aaron v'lo b'nos Aaron. The halacha of Thu May Kohanim, of not being able to come in contact with the dead, to a cemetery or being in the same room as the dead, applies to male Kohanim and not to women, i.e. a wife of a Kohen or a daughter of a Kohen does not have the prohibition of coming in contact with the dead. So usually when we come to modern technology, it usually makes things easier, definitely in terms of lifestyle, but also in terms of halacha, it depends on the issue. So in terms of DNA coming out, it might help us out, which is a separate share on DNA, whether we accept it, but different types of technologies might make things easier. However, regarding the question of an ultrasound and sonograms, this could cause problems for a wife of a Kohen, a pregnant wife of a Kohen. As the question is, what if a wife of a Kohen is pregnant? Is she permitted to come in contact with the dead? Well, we just said it applies to the men and not the women. However, we know that the wife is pregnant. Perhaps she's pregnant with the boy, and therefore maybe she can't enter the cemetery or come in contact with the dead because of the fetus. So the Shach quotes from the Rokeach that it's not a problem. The pregnant wife of a Kohen can go into a cemetery, can come in contact with the dead. Why? Based on one of the kolim we have of svek sveika. In other words, the Talmud tells us we have a principle of safek d'oraisa l'chumra. We have a principle of doubt regarding a biblical law with strict on. A general rule of doubt regarding a rabbinic law with lenient, safek d'rabbanan l'kula. There's a third principle, svek sveika, when you have a double doubt. So even on a biblical law will lenient. So the Rokeach says it's a svek sveika. One doubt is maybe it's a male, maybe it's a female, the fetus. And even if the fetus is a male, maybe it'll be a nefel, a child that's not going to live. It's not a viable child, and therefore the laws of Tumah don't apply and it won't be a problem. So that's the svek sveika of the Rokeach. That maybe it's a male, maybe it's a female, and maybe the child won't even make it to fruition. So based on this, the Kohanim, the wife of a Kohen, is permitted to come in contact with the dead. However, that was before the ultrasounds and sonograms. Today it's routine procedure that doctors take ultrasounds of the fetus. So the question is, if you're a wife of a Kohen, are you obligated to take an ultrasound? And even if you're not obligated, if you did take one and you find out it's a male, would that pose a problem? So it's a general question in terms of a svek sveika. Let's say you could resolve the svek sveika. Let's say you could resolve the doubts. So that's a general issue, the Ramah and the Shach. The Ramah is lenient and the Shach is machmir when it's easy to check, so we don't rely on svek sveika. And here with the sonogram, it's a routine sonogram. According to the Shach, you wouldn't be able to rely on svek sveika because you could resolve the doubt. However, the Nodes of Yehuda points out that even the Shach, even those who are machmir, that when you could resolve the double doubt, that you can't rely on the svek sveika, But that's only if you could that's only if you could resolve both of the doubts. But in our case, we can only resolve the issue whether it's a male or a female. We won't be able to resolve whether it's going to be a nafel or not, and therefore the Noda writes, even according to the Machmirim, in this case, you could rely on Svek Sveka because you only could resolve one of those doubts. And therefore perhaps you wouldn't have been obligated then to find out and to take a sonogram. And that seems to be the opinion of Rabbi Hager and the Marshal, that since we can only resolve one of the doubts, so we wouldn't be obligated to resolve the first doubt either, and we could work with the Svek Sveka. However, the Pri Megadim, the Eshel Avram, they have a question. They don't like this Svek Sveka for another reason. They quote a Tosis in Ksubis on Daf Tes that we know in general in the column of Svek Sveka is what they call a suffix hashakol. You have to have a suffix that's like 50% or close to. You can't throw in a Svek Sveka about some minority percentage. So that's what they claim. It's true. It's about a 50% chance a male or female fetus, but it's a minority that they're in the Nephilim, that the child's not going to be viable. So therefore, the Pri Megadim claim in Eshel Avram that the Svek Sveka of the Rokeach is not good. And therefore, the Chasim Sofer reinterprets the opinion of the Rokeach. He's not really saying Svek Sveka. The reason why he's lenient is based on Rov. The principle, if you have a majority, you have a 51% chance, so then there's the halacha of Rovs. Achari Rabba Mahatos, in different situations, we could follow the majority. So, they point out the problem is that if you say that Rokeach is working on Rov, so you have a problem, because Rov, we know if there's something called a miyat hamatzoi, if there's a minority thing that's present, so many postim assume 10%. If there's more than a 10% chance that this could happen, so even though, so midrabanan, you're obligated to check. In other words, as Rav Schechter or others say, that by testing your suits for shotness, if there's more than a 10% chance that the suit is shotness, then midrabanan you'll be obligated to check. So therefore you can't rely on Rov, and therefore it's based on Rov, so there's a minority, therefore since this could be easily resolved, you could just do a sonogram. So therefore one would have to be machmir and do the sonogram to find out, because it's like a miyat hamatzoi, and therefore you'll be obligated to check. Since viable children are well over, because why is the role? Because half the people are girls, and then another small percentage is a nafel, those who are not viable. So therefore, you have over 50% chance that it's not. You have over 50% chance, but you have a lot more. But there's a lot more than a 10% chance that it's a viable male, and therefore, according to Rabbi, a wife of a Kohen would be obligated to check if she's pregnant and she wants to come in contact with the dead. She'd be obligated to take an ultrasound or sonogram to verify that the fetus is a female. And as Rabbi points out, of course, except when the wife is she's permitted to give birth in the hospital, because that's a pikuach nefesh. The Gemara always treats childbirth as pikuach nefesh, and even medical studies show it's safer to give birth in the hospital. So everyone would agree that when in terms of giving birth, she'd be permitted out pikuach nefesh to go to the hospital. But barring that, Rabbi would say that she cannot come in contact, be in the same room as the dead. So that's the issue of Svek Sveka. So the Rokeach says Svek Sveka, there's a discussion, do you have an obligation to resolve a svek sveika? And the Odu points out you don't have to if you only can resolve one, so you could be lenient. However, others say it's not a good svek sveika because it's not a 50-50. Much more kids are viable than not viable. Therefore, they want to reinterpret the rokeach as saying rove, and if you're going with rove, so then you have a chumrah that you have to do. It's a mir hamatzah. You have over 10% viable males, and therefore you'd be obligated. The wife of a Kohen would be obligated to take a sonogram, and to make, if she wanted to come into contact with the dead, except of course when she's giving birth, then she'd be permitted to go to the hospital. However, there are others who disagree and say you can rely on the svek sveika of the rokeach. What about the question of tosis and ksuvis? It's not a safek hashakol. So that's what the Rivash points out, who lived about 150 years before the Magen Avraham. He says a safek pertains to a natural occurring event, so even if it's not a 50%, then we quote the Gemara in Yevamos that shows that if it's a natural occurring event, then you could use this one prong of the svek sveika, even if it's not a 50-50. And the Tosus and Ksuvis, who is rejecting the svek sveika, that's based on a person's behavior, but not on some natural thing. So therefore, since here it's a natural thing, the fetus is in the mother's womb, therefore one can rely on the rokeach svek sveika. One suffix, maybe it's a male, maybe it's a female. Even if it's a male, maybe it won't be viable. So therefore, there are many poskim who say one Reb Bleich is machmir, but many poskim, Rav Zalman, Nehemiah Goldberg, among others, are lenient that one can rely on the svek sveika of the rokeach. There's a famous question of the Magen Avraham on this rokeach, that the Magen Avraham says, there's a Gemara in Chulin on 71a, that the luck is, let's say you swallow a ring, and then you become tameh, the ring still remains tar. Why does the ring remain tar? Because the concept of tuma be'ula, the mother's womb, the stomach is protecting, is surrounding the ring, and therefore tuma can't get inside. So therefore, the Magen Avraham asks, based on this halacha of tuma be'ula, so why do we need the svek sveika of the rokeach? To say simply, the reason why a pregnant wife of a Kohen can go into a room of dead people or a cemetery is because tuma be'ula, the fetus is protected. That's the kasha of the Magen Avraham. Why do we need the svek sveika of the rokeach? So the Radvaz explains that, actually before that was the Rivash who gave the distinction before about the suffix pertaining to a natural event. Now it's the Radvaz. The Radvaz answers that when do we say we need this svek sveika of the rokeach? What's the concern if we have tuma be'ula? So he said that's only when we know the woman's very close to giving birth, and the concern is that she's going to give birth at any moment. So then we rely on the svek sveika of the rokeach in case she might give birth suddenly. But if not, then that's what the Mishnah Berurah and the Chassidus Sofer work with this Radvaz. That in general we're not concerned, we work, the tuma be'ula works, the fetus is protected inside. It's only when she's close to term, close to giving birth, is when we have to come on to the svek sveika of the rokeach. There's however, among the yeshivas, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Chanan Wasserman, Rav Chaim Ozer, Rav Hershel Schachter as well, feels very strongly on this. He holds that even though it seems to go against the simple reading of the Chumash at the Isser, most assume the Isser for a Kohen to come in contact with the dead is result-oriented. We don't want you to become tummy. But if somehow you could come in contact with the dead and not become tummy, so it might be okay. However, other Achronim disagree and say it's also for a Kohen to become in contact with the dead even if he doesn't become tummy. Well, the converse he may become Tameh even without contact. In other words, even if you say Tuma B'lua, but so what? There's an issur for the fetus, the male fetus inside, to come in contact with the dead, and therefore they don't like the Tuma B'lua. Even if it's true you don't become Tameh, but still it's also to come in contact with the dead. However, from Tosis in Shuvis and Avchavches, they ask a kasha on this shita because we know there's a halach of Safek Tamei B'Rishis Harabim Tahar. There's a general, whole different sugya, but the halach is if it's in a place where if you're in Rishis Harabim, a public place, and it's a Safek Tuma, so we say the Kohen's Tahar. How can he come in contact with the dead even if it's Tahar? We see it against Rav Elchanan and Rav Chaim. So that's a discussion, but Pashas most assume it's result-oriented, and therefore we go with the Tuma B'lua. That a woman is protecting the fetus, and therefore you don't have, so you have the Rokeach Svek Sveika, but even if you don't like the Rokeach Svek Sveika, you have the Magen Avram's Tuma B'lua, and some don't like it because they say it's also for fetus to come in contact with the dead, even if it doesn't become Tameh, but most assume not that way. The Avnei Meluim doesn't like the Magen Avram's Tuma B'lua for another reason. He rejects it. He says because where do we see this concept that the mother protects what's inside the fetus? That's only if it's a foreign object. Someone had a ring and the ring became Tameh. Only someone swallowed a ring and the person became Tameh, but the ring remains tar, because that's not part of the mother. However, the fetus isn't a foreign object. In other words, as the Gemara tells us in Yavamas 78a, that if there's a non-Jewish pregnant woman who's converting to Judaism, so the halacha is when she goes to the mikvah, it works on her and her child. The fetus is considered born Jewish. So, if the Gemara says, Hainu Ravi say that it's a normal way that the child develops. In other words, we see it's not a chatzitza for something if it's a normal way. So therefore, if the fetus in the mother's womb is the normal way, and therefore according to the Avnei Meluim, you can't use the Magen Avram's heter of Tuma B'lua. That only works if it's a foreign object, but the fetus is a natural object, it won't work. And in fact, Rav Zalman Nechemya Goldberg quotes the Maisa, the Mishnah in Para, about how careful they were to make sure that the women in Yerushalayim, when they gave birth, they were tar. They used to bring them to a separate place right at birth. I weren't to worry about it before. So it must be that they didn't view it was an issue. They didn't view it was an issue until birth. And we see you don't become Tameh, Tuma only begins at birth. To defend the Avnei Meluim, maybe he holds fetus does become Tameh in the uterus, but once they come out, so we hold it's a new entity. But either way, that's the Avnei Meluim's taina, that it's only by a ring we say Tuma B'lua, but by a fetus, which is natural, based on the Gemara in Yavamas, we see there is not a chatzitza, and therefore Tuma B'lua doesn't work. So if you reject the Svek Sveika, and you say it's working robe, and if you reject Tuma B'lua, like the Avnei Meluim and Rav Shechter and others, then perhaps there's a third reason why we could be lenient. The question is, at what point does this boy become a Kohen? Does the fetus become a Kohen? Or does the male fetus become a Kohen, or you only become a Kohen after birth? So that's what the Chasam Sofer raises. The Gemara in Yavama 67a. If a fetus is in the womb of a Kohen, so we still consider it like a Zar. It doesn't get the status of a Kohen until after birth. That's what the Minchas Chinuch writes as well, that the fetus does not become a Kohen. Rav Zev Soloveitchik disagrees and says even in utero. That's a whole discussion in general. At what point is considered, at what point does the father-son relationship begin? That does the begin of the discussion, when does the mother-child relationship begin? Maybe one could argue because it begins to her because she gave birth to him, but perhaps the father-child relation doesn't begin until birth. So that's a discussion, and so some Chassidus overclaims that the fetus inside the child is not a Kohen. So if it's not a Kohen, it's a non-issue. So to summarize, we had different opinions. We had Rav Bleich, among others, who was Machmir, who said a wife of a Kohen cannot rely on the Svek Sveika, or because he learns that the Svek Sveika isn't good, it's not a Safek HaShakol, and therefore it's relying on Rov, and the halacha by Rov, that more than 10% of the children are viable males, and one would be obligated to take a sonogram in order, if a wife of a Kohen wanted to come in contact with the dead. Until she's ready to go to the hospital, we assume it's a pikuach nefesh, and she'd be permitted to. That's the Shitas HaMachmirim, as well as Rav Shechter, Rav Chanan, who hold that the fact you don't become tummy doesn't make a difference, and therefore the fact that there's an issur to come in contact with the dead regardless of whether you become tummy. And Rav Shechter also is machmer. He doesn't like the kulas. He also seems to go that one perhaps would be obligated to take a sonogram to find out if it's a male or not. However, the lenient opinion has much to rely on. Either we have three reasons basically what the lenient opinion can rely on. You have the rokeach of the svek sveika. Maybe it's a male, maybe it's a female. Even if it's a male, maybe it will be a nefel, so we don't have to worry. And therefore, a pregnant woman, a wife of a Kohen, can come in contact with the dead. We have the Magen Avram of Thu May, that since it's encircled inside, so therefore we don't have to worry. The Avnei Miluim and others disagree, but that's what the Magen Avram writes. That Avnei Miluim doesn't like it because he says it has to be natural, and the ring case was natural. There is no chatzitza, only a foreign object. And then we have the third reason, that when does the fetus have a status of a Kohen? So some point out, the Minchas Chinuch and others, the Chasim Sofer, based on the Gemara in Yevamos, that the male fetus doesn't take on the status of a Kohen until after birth, so it's a non-issue. And just let me point out anyway, after all said and done, even though, according to many posts, Rav Shechter, Rav Bleich, Machmer, but many Amekos, and even if you go with the lenient opinion that the wife of a Kohen can come in contact with the dead, nevertheless, anyway, there's an old tradition, a Minhag Yisrael, that the wife of any pregnant woman does not go into a cemetery, even if you're a wife of a Levi or Yisrael, because the highest level of life is a woman. She has double life. She has an Uber, and the cemetery is the Avi Avos Tuma. Coming in contact with the dead is the Avi Avos Tuma. So we try to avoid the minhag. Again, Vayikra din is permitted. If you have a Riyok Sarach, you'll be allowed to. But the minhag is for a wife of a Kohen not to, not a wife of a Kohen, but the minhag Yisrael is any pregnant woman should not enter a cemetery. That's the minhag. And this parenthetically, just to conclude, as I point out many times, I'm asked, does Jewish law change? So I say, what do you mean by change? If you ask me the same question now, and you asked me the same question 300 years ago, then yes, I might give you a different answer. But if you ask me about the principles given at Har Sinai never change. And this case of a wife of a Kohen is a classic example I like giving. A couple hundred years ago, we had the rokeach to rely on, a double doubt, before the advent of modern technology and the sonograms. So therefore, if somebody asked the Shaila, the halacha was, it's a svek, it's a double doubt, and therefore, you're lenient. Perhaps today, with the advent of the sonogram, and you took it and you found it was a male, again, according to those shitas, many are meko anyway for other reasons. You have the tuma balua, and yeah, maybe it's on a meal, but the concept is that if you got rid of one of the suffix, one of the doubts, it would be only one doubt, and the principle would be suffix d'oraisa l'chumra. A doubt regarding a biblical law you're strict on. So it's an example where if a wife of a Kohen asked a child a couple of years ago, perhaps she'd get the answer it's mutta based on spek sveka. But today with the sonogram, someone might argue that you have to be more machmer based on the principle of suffix d'oraisa l'chumra.